All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back from lunch. So the thing about lunch is it's called the food coma. Who understands the food coma? Yeah, don't do that, right? So my name is Vincent Mayers. I work at Gradle, and I work on community programs for Gradle. And interesting to remember here is I am not a software engineer. I just play one on TV. Okay, this will have some bearing and context in a little bit. This talk, 3 Cups of Java, comes from this book or the title comes from this book, 3 Cups of Tea by Greg Mortensen and David Rellin. The background here is Greg was a climber, a mountaineer, and he was climbing in the high Hindu Kush, or the Afghan mountains, and he fell and he was injured, and he ended up being nursed back to health by a local tribe, the Balti tribe. He was there for some months because he was hurt quite seriously. And while he was recovering in this village, he saw some children playing in the dirt. Well, he thought they were playing in the dirt outside one of the houses. And when he brought this up with someone, they said, no, this is their school. They are learning. They are scratching in the dirt. They are scratching problems and writing in the dirt. And he was so impacted by this and so grateful to this village for helping him. He decided that he wanted to build a school for these children. And then he realized that he couldn't build a school because there wasn't a bridge over the river, so he had to build a bridge over the river. Fast forward, Greg started a non-profit to build schools in the high Afghan mountains for girls. And he did this in collaboration with the Taliban. This was the time during the whole kind of Afghan war. And this book was required reading for Allied military commanders in the region for some time because it gave such an insight into the culture of the region. Now, a lot of his backstory has been debunked, and he ended up apparently defrauding a lot of donors and things like that. However, the sentiment of this thing remains the same. At the start of this book, there is a passage, and it goes, in Balti village, Pashtun culture, Pashtun being the region, the first time you share tea with someone, you're a stranger. The second time you take tea, you're an honored guest. And the third time you take tea, you become family. Okay? So, I want to talk about the importance of the number 3. Okay? It has a lot of bearing on this and in our lives generally. Religion. Okay? In Christianity, there are 3 main elements: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. In Buddhism, you have the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. In Hinduism, you have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva as the 3 main elements. In mythology, and if anyone can pronounce these better than I can, just keep it to yourself, okay? You're in Niflheim, which is the land of ice. You have Ginnungagap, which is the land of fire, and you have Muspelheim, which is the mist in between them. In Greek mythology, you have Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. In Egyptian, Osiris, Isis, and Horus. In literature, Aladdin had 3 wishes. There were 3 bears. There were 3 elven rings. In science, observable matter is a solid, a liquid, and a gas. Right, you can actually argue against that. There are more forms of observable matter, and in the multiverse there are many more, but in this verse, it's a solid, a liquid, and a gas. In biology, there are 3 nucleoids, or codons, which determine the genetic code of everything. And our perception of color relies on 3 types of cone cell in the retina, and cones are divided into 3 types: short range, medium range, long range, which are actually 3 colors: red, green, and blue, 3 primary colors. All right, so I get that 3 is important, but what the heck has this got to do with community? Let's read this again. The first time you share tea, you're a stranger. The second time you take tea, you're an honored guest. The third time you share a cup of tea, you become family. All right? A brief run through communities from the dawn of, well, for the last 10,000 years. So early communities, 10,000 BC, primitive communities, there were 3 main drivers: shelter, food, and security. You fast forward a little bit to the Neolithic period, and society has become a little more organized. And you see the birth of organized agriculture, domestication of animals, and more stability. The classical era, around 500 BC, in Greece, you saw the rise of democracy. City-states started to evolve, and the concept of civic duty, of giving back. In the Han Dynasty in China, and this is really interesting, it was accredited to the start of global trade because they opened the Silk Road, okay, which enabled trade from east to west. They developed technology. Things like the wheelbarrow and the seismograph were accredited to being invented in the Han Dynasty. And they were prominent in art. Porcelain. Porcelain was invented in the Han Dynasty. Fast forward, medieval communities, 500 AD, around there, you had medieval communities. So feudalism, manneralism, and religion were the 3 main drivers. So manneralism was basically the lord of the manor, the baron, the earl, who then had knights that worked for him and fought battles, and serfs or peasants that supported them. That sounds like a scam to me. It sounds like mafia, however. And these manors gave rise to feudalism, feuding states, as these castles run by these earls fought each other. And then religion was predominant back then, especially in Europe. It was Christianity. Early modern times, okay, we saw the rise of nation states as really driven by advances in transportation technology. Ships got bigger and better. People were able to trade around the world. We saw, and that gave rise to colonialism as populations started to move themselves and other populations from one continent to the other. And then again, industry. It was the birth of the Industrial Revolution at that time. Okay, a what if here. So, the Ming voyages in around the 15th century. These ships were developed by an Admiral Zheng He. Okay, they were 140 meters long, and they sailed from China. They traded from China with the East African coast. That's as far as they went. Now, can you imagine if these 140-meter ships had actually rounded Cape Horn and actually started to trade with Northern Europe, or went the other way, if they went east and got to the west of America? I think our world would be slightly different today. I think there might be a little more Chinese influence today. All right, so contemporary. Around about our time, a little bit, maybe like 100 years ago. So we saw, physical communities become important. We saw the rise of suburbia and diversity due to advances in transportation technology. People were now able to live further from where they worked. And transportation technology allowed people from other countries and cultures to move around the world. Okay? And in online communities, which is kind of where we are now for the most part, you saw the 3 main drivers were shared interests, and it's one of the reasons why we're all here, communication, and the rules and norms that go around that. Okay? So, think about this first slide, right? The main drivers in primitive communities were shelter, food, and security. Take a little bit of an intellectual leap here. Shelter to shared interests, food to communication, and security to these rules and norms that we have today. And then I wonder, what, if anything, has changed in the last 10,000 years? Or are we still this person in a cave but with a computer? But let's look at security for a second. The rules and norms of how we interact with each other today, especially online, as that's how a lot of us communicate, and especially younger generations, like my 11-year-old communicates. There's a need for inclusivity and things like codes of conduct so that people feel safe. Again, rules and norms equates to security. Now, the challenge with inclusivity, as you see here, we've got this nice group of multicolored people of all abilities and genders and what have you. It's really easy to become exclusive or selectively exclusive when you're trying really hard to be inclusive. So you had this multicolored, multi-gendered, multi-ability community, and then all the green people got together. And then the rest of the community became excluded. I see this happening in the communities that I'm involved in the tech world. This is actually very prevalent in the tech world. It's just something we need to watch out for. So, who's heard of Peter Gabriel? Oh boy, now you guys are making me feel old. This is making me feel older. There's a live album, imaginatively created, Peter Gabriel Plays Live, which came out in 1980. And there's a song called Not One of Us. And Peter is talking about, he's introducing the song, and he says, this is a song about groups of people that make themselves into smaller groups in order to feel strong by excluding others. And I thought that was very pertinent when we're thinking about how we try and be inclusive today. All right, so we're social animals, okay? We need human interaction for a number of different reasons, for cognitive function, for emotional support, development, mental health, physical health, and all of this promotes longevity, okay? Gartner, in a number of reports, has stated that by 2024, less than 24% of all meetings will be in person. Other reports or other studies show that employees, main drivers in the workplace are that they have value and purpose. And as evidenced by recent years, because of the global health crisis, our mental state is vital, and was very, very affected in recent times. I don't know if we've all come back from that. So interestingly, Jesse, who has a talk in this room right after this one, is going to talk about some of this, about creating psychologically safe engineering teams. It speaks to a lot of those previous slides. I encourage you to stay for that. All right, so this is going to be tough because I know some of you. Who's is this first time at a tech conference? Anybody? Okay. How about the first time at a tech conference since the pandemic? All right. You're here, so you're outliers, right? And why I say this will become apparent soon. Now, again, human interaction is vital, right? If your work environment doesn't provide a way for you to do this, it's up to you to seek it out. How do we do this? In the context of our interest in software engineering or technology generally, there are three ways that are available. Well, there are more, but these are the three main ways that's available to us: through conferences, through tech groups, and through your teams. Okay. When we go to conferences, there are three main elements that we benefit from: learning, social interaction, and motivation. Right? The great thing about being here for a few days, you can learn online. Okay. Sometimes a lot of the technical talks are available, and you can get the new technical thing by watching the video. However, when you're out of your house, or out of your city, or out of your country, for some of you, you get a singular focus. Okay? All right, who checks their work email when they're here? Come on, you all do this. You know this. Slack, right? The ones that don't, congratulations. Okay, it allows you to have a singular focus and be in the moment with the people that you're with. Of course, it allows you to develop new skills. And this is interesting. So those of you that have been to a conference and there's a very popular talk and the room is full, how many people does that happen to where you can't get in the room? Okay? When that happens, don't stand at the back. Go to something else. If it's a conference like this, where there's lots of different things going on, there's just not one singular focus on a language or a platform, go to a Node.js talk. Go to an AI talk. You know what, go to a CSS talk. I know lots of people in this room that need to go to a CSS talk, right? It might just give you another perspective on something that you're doing, or it might just be really interesting. You might meet some new people that you wouldn't have met and get new insights into things that you're currently working on because of how they're handled by another domain. The social interaction, the networking, the collaboration, the relationships. Who's familiar with the concept of the hallway track? Okay, some people. So for those that are not, the hallway track is the conversations that you have between the sessions, over coffee, over lunch, in the bar. And sometimes these conversations can be way more beneficial than the latest talk on new features in Java or Spring Boot, whatever. You're having a conversation with someone that you just met randomly, and your real-world use case for something that you're working on comes up, and they may not have solved this, but they could have a perspective on it that changes your life, that makes you think in different ways. That's way more powerful than the latest features of something. The motivation that I personally get, and I hope you get from coming to these things, I'll advance a little bit, but I've done a lot in art in the past. And when you're an artist, there's a reason why artists go to art communes, gather, okay, in groups, because they feed off each other's creativity and passion. You may be a sculptor working in clay, but you see somebody drawing something in charcoal or painting in oil, and it's like, oh wow, that's a great concept. I want to encompass some of that in my own work. It's the same when you're here at a tech conference. It starts to get you thinking in different ways, and because you're more excited, it gives you renewed purpose in what you're doing. All right, tech groups. There's a number of these ways. There's meetups now, there's jugs, and there's hackathons. There's 3 avenues to do this. So Java-centric meetups. There are over 1,300 groups on meetup.com. Meetup's kind of become the de facto, and not every group is on there, but there are over 1,300 groups that are somehow connected to the JVM or the Java ecosystem in over 470 cities in over 80 countries. Jugs, Java user groups. This is info from foojay.io. For those that don't know, Foojay, FOOJAY.io, stands for Friends of OpenJDK, is a great resource for communities, for finding, for reading interesting articles, for finding events, for collaborating. There's over 230 listed Java user groups in the world, in over 200 cities in 60 plus countries. Hackathons. Now these pop up. Who's been to a hackathon? Okay. Those of you that haven't, I encourage you to go for a number of reasons. This example here, 48 in 48, happens in my hometown of Atlanta, USA. And their mission is to build 48 websites for 48 nonprofits in 48 hours. Okay? The last one went, there was over 200 people there. We gathered at a venue, and people brought sleeping bags and cots and stuff. The food was catered, and everyone was there. You know, and it started from the wireframe up. And all right, this was websites, and they may have used some templates, and they might have been coding in pure HTML or some kind of JavaScript framing. But why not go to one of these? You're Java, you're engineers, okay? You could learn stuff. You can contribute because you could have a different perspective on how they're doing things, okay? It challenges you too. You grow, you learn. This is a hackathon from, I think it was 2019. It says it on there. I can't read it. In Russia, there were over 3,200 people at this hackathon. It's in the Guinness World Book of Records. Pretty amazing. All right, so your team. Now, you may or may not be back in the office. If you are, you're with your team. You may be hybrid. You may be 100% remote. But there are still things that you can do, okay? If you live in a major metro area, there could be somebody else from your company that works in that town if you're completely hybrid and there isn't an office. They could work in a completely different department. Why not meet them? Grab lunch, grab drinks. If you're hybrid, then make an effort to do this with your teammates. It's all too easy to go into the office for 2 days a week and just come. Right? If you're in the office all the time, it's a little easier to organize this. Lunch and learns. Again, this only really works if you're kind of fully back in the office or hybrid. Bring people in over lunchtime. Okay? A local speaker from one of the local groups, a jug or whatever. Bring in an expert. Bring in a vendor. So you may be using whatever software from whatever vendor, but their engineers should be expert in that. They could show you some things that you probably don't know. You've been using this thing for years, and they show you some things you don't, and you go, wow, thank you. But the third and most important thing with this is, this all starts with you. Okay, you've got to take personal responsibility for this. Don't wait for your boss or for somebody else. It starts with you. Otherwise, it will not happen. Okay? So, to that end, none of this is possible without consistency. As software engineers, we're familiar with the term eventual consistency. Okay? So to read this from CityDB, an update will eventually be reflected in all nodes that store the data, resulting in the same response every time the data is queried. Okay? And there's lots of really boring, stringy drawings that illustrate this with node A this and node B that. Another way to look at this is this kind of cool cartoon. And it's like his computer's talking here. I'm going to have to read it because I can't. Let's see. I know it's hard to focus right now, but we should try and finish testing the DB. Ugh. Okay. The system needs to guarantee eventual consistency. I mean, it does. Eventual consistency is guaranteed by the second law of thermodynamics. Sooner or later, this will all be a uniform heat bath, maximum entropy. Maximum entropy means no useful work is being done. I'm getting a head start right now. The challenge with these two examples is this. Will eventually, sooner or later. This is not good enough for us. Okay? We need intentional consistency in order to achieve the outcomes that we want that will ultimately benefit us the most. And the thing about eventual or intentional consistency is it's really, really hard. Okay? But remember, it all starts with you. You have to take personal responsibility for this. And there's some examples that I'll give where intentional consistency is vital. Okay? If you're an athlete, with your training, your mental preparation, your conditioning, you will never become the best athlete you can possibly be. And that best you can possibly be doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win the Olympics or whatever. That doesn't matter. As an athlete, the goal is to be the best version of you as an athlete you can possibly be. Not possible without being intentional. With work, I use this example from an Atlanta Java user group meeting we had in 2019. Okay, Quarkus had just come out that year, and Burr Sutter from Red Hat came and did a talk on Quarkus. Okay, now a lady that was at this talk, I saw her maybe 3 months later. Okay, she had been coming to the Jug meeting for a while, and so she was, a solid member of our community. And she shared that she had been at a job interview previously, some weeks previously, where, for a Java development role, Quarkus was not part of the required stack. They didn't even have it. However, the interviewer asked her if she knew anything about it. And she said, I've never used it, but I was at a Java user group meeting a a few months ago. And it's really compelling for this reason, for that reason, for the other reason. She was told that she got the job because of that comment, because she had a perspective, because she was intentional about her involvement in this community. Who has kids? Intentional consistency is hard with children, so hard. I mean, the support is a given, but the boundaries and the habits you try and form, because life gets in the way, it's a very, very, very challenging to be intentionally consistent with children, but they need boundaries. They have to have boundaries in order to grow into functioning adults, and not the little terrors that I have. Anyway, so remember this guy? Normally I'm wearing this hat, right? But I lost it on Saturday. I'm very disappointed about that. Again, I'm not a software engineer. I just play one on TV. In reality, I have a degree in pottery. I spent 4 years at art school doing this. Okay? Why the hell am I here? In the job that I have in this room. Going back to the examples I gave you of athletics and work and kids, I was this person, okay, this athlete. This is me at the 1993 World Championships in Italy. I've lived this life of intentionality in mental preparation, in conditioning, in technique. Could never have gotten there without a singular focus. With work, I was a tech recruiter for almost 20 years. I learned very early on the importance of understanding what a tech stack was. I'll date myself here. So in the city in London, in around I don't know, 97, Java wasn't really mainstream yet. The tech stack du jour in banking for enterprise technology was C++, Sybase, and with Power Builder front ends, right? And messaging and middleware and all that. So I remember being in a meeting, and I'm selling our recruitment services or our staffing services, and then talking to the customer or the potential customer, and I'm like, oh, we can provide engineers. They know C++, they know Sybase, they know Corber. He's like, stop. What's Corber? But I knew. I said it's Common Object Request Broker Architecture, and right now the tool that everyone uses around here is Orbix by Iona out of Dublin. And he was blown away that I knew. But I knew because I understood that I had to understand what engineers were saying and why they were saying it. Okay. Fast forward that, moving to the US, I started to go to the Atlanta Java user group in 2004. I had a staffing company. J2E was blowing up then, and I wanted to meet people in the community. I wanted to meet potential consultants. I wanted to meet potential customers. I wanted to learn more. So I started to sponsor the Java user group. And I took my banner every month and put it on the wall. Took my jobs to hand out. 7 o'clock at night. All the presentations back then were pure coding on an IDE, live debugging, right? None of this PowerPoint stuff. Live coding for 2 hours. And I'm trying not to fall asleep at the back of the room, like, aha, look, the recruiter falling asleep. But over time, I learned more and more because I just listened and got more involved in this community. And when the gentleman that was running the group left to move to another city, asked me to join the board. So I was always present, and I'm a business guy, I'm a sales guy, so I'm now the CFO of the Java user group. And then by default, I'm starting to run the conference we run every year, DevNexus, because no one else wanted to do it. And then what did that do? I mean, I'd never run a conference before then, 2008. Well, I guess we need to talk to the venue, and we need sponsors, and they need contracts, and we need food and speakers, and blah, blah. And there was other people involved. But that led me into running this conference, which meant I actually then went to other conferences to see how they ran so I could make mine better, right? I started to meet some of the speakers that travel to these conferences, started to become part of that ecosystem, and then got nominated as the Java champion because I'm a non-technical person that's heavily invested in the community. Fast forward that, we got involved with Microprofile when they needed to form a working group and steering committee. So here I am, like a guy with a degree in pottery who's a steering committee member for Microprofile. What? So I illustrate this because, just to further illustrate the point I made earlier, none of this happened by accident. I was very intentional about, of course I enjoyed it, but I was very intentional about it. And then with kids, so these are my two. Again, it is so hard. It is so hard to be intentional. I love them to death, but it's just like that. I mean, sometimes I love them to death, but it's really, really, really hard to create these habits that give them the boundaries they need so we're not pulling our hair out all the time. What's any of this got to do with cups of tea? You might well ask. I want to share with you the bakery scenario. Okay. Many years ago, I was in New York City, traveling, and no money, staying in a youth hostel. And then the youth hostel was above a bakery. So, the first morning, I go in, hi, can I have a cup of coffee? Again, reference this when I'm talking to you. The second morning, I go in, hey, welcome back. Nice to see you. The third time I go back in, oh, come on in. We just made some fresh baklava. Have a piece. Have a seat. Think about this in the context of all the interactions you've had with people in your lives, not just in our tech ecosystem, but just generally. It usually starts this way. Yes, there's cat pictures. The first cup of tea, you're a stranger. It's a hi. The second cup of tea, you're friends. The third cup of tea, you're family. Again, it usually goes this way most of the times that we meet somebody new in any environment, but it can't happen in the same day, okay? One of the special things about being part of any community, our community here is Java focused, or let's just say tech focused, because we're at DevBcn now, is we have shared goals and shared interests, okay? That's a really important element, and it fuels this interaction of the first time you meet someone, the second time, and the third time, all right? A hi, a handshake, and a hug. Community stuff to me, what I get most out of it is it's a sense of belonging. Again, shared interests, collaboration, working with other people to do stuff that we all love doing, okay? And then giving back, okay? I personally am really bad at getting gifts from people. I don't really know what to do, kind of awkward. Oh, thank you. But I love to give them gifts. It gives me so much pleasure. We can give back in multiple ways as engineers. So 3 cups of tea or something else. This is how it usually goes with us in the communities that we work in. So I'd love to connect. I'm useless at Twitter, just bear that in mind. I will not respond to a direct message. But if you connect with me on LinkedIn or email me, I'd love to stay connected. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Vincent. That was awesome. One of the questions that often pops in my mind is when I go around and visit different Java user groups around the world, I notice there's a trend of the age group that I see in a lot of these user groups. People of my age or close to my age who got really excited about Java and other things. And then there's a huge gap. I don't see the 20-something or the 30-something as much as you see the 40-something or the 50 or even the 60-somethings. So what can we do to get the next generation, because they grew up in a very different world than people like me did. So what can we do to get the next generation on board and get them excited and be part of this community?
Sorry, he's gone. Hello. All right. So what I found is it's hard enough to get our demographic, Venkat, to come to these things. A lot of time they have absolutely no idea that these things even exist. I'll give you an example. So there are a couple of major enterprise companies in my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia. You may gather I'm actually not from Atlanta, Georgia, because of my accent, but I do live there. AT&T, big telecom company, and the Home Depot, a big store. And between them, I think there are probably at least 4,000 Java developers just between those two companies. Okay, and the challenge we have as folks that run these community groups is how to reach them, because you're right, the demographic does skew older compared to, say, front-end communities. But it's not because there aren't young people involved. Okay, I think it's more a symptom of most people have absolutely no idea these things exist. So what do we do as user group leaders? We talk about this all the time in our leader summits and stuff. And I know in Atlanta we tried different things. We tried to do lunch and learns at these companies. We even went to one company, ADP, and we put flyers up in the wall on the cafeteria, and one of the engineering managers said we could do this. And then the HR people made us take them down. I'm like, but we're offering free training for your people. Oh no, you can't do that. You can't have these on the wall. All right, that's really forward thinking of you. I don't know what the answer is, Venkat. And again, you can argue that there are less people coming out of school and going to Java, and some of us have had this conversation and beat this conversation to death because, all right, university professors, they teach Go and Rust or something like that, which is supposed to take Java over, but I don't think they will. Because they see more demand right now in the marketplace, and they're on that kind of Gartner hype curve. But they are coming out with CS degrees, and they are going into working in the Java ecosystem. It may not be just a language; it could just be cloud-native stuff, right? But they just don't know. And honestly, if you could tell me how to reach those people, I would love to hear it. We've been battling this for years. All right, well, thanks very much for coming.